Tonight we are continuing to walk through the Ten Commandments as we are just more broadly speaking taking a look at Luther's large catechism, trying to wrap our minds around, again, the basics of the Christian faith, but doing it maybe in a slightly more fresh perspective through the lens of that large catechism as opposed to what we're normally used to doing, going through the small catechism. Were there any thoughts or questions left over from last week as we were covering the first three commandments?
Can I ask a question from Sunday?
Yes.
So I believe the key word in that gospel reading was renounce.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that because that, to me, that means you completely turn your back on it, disown it, put it away. And it was your family.
Yep.
And I mean, I can't even renounce my possessions.
Yes.
I can partly, I can moderate.
Yeah.
But I can't. I have things that I like and activities.
Yep.
And I can't renounce this stuff. I can't do it.
Yep. Yeah, and if only it were renounced as if you leave it all behind, but that first word that Jesus used is hate. And that is a very, very strong, very harsh word to use. Not only turn your back on it, but like kick it while it's down kind of vibe to it. What I tried to get at, I think I did a better job second service than I did the first service, is as we are reflecting on even the good things that God has given us, father, mother, wife, children, brother, sister, all that he has, even his own life, Jesus says, we have to hate these things, to renounce all that we have. Unless you do that, you cannot be Jesus' disciples. So there's something about following Jesus that means he is your sole focus, your primary motivation, and in fact, your only motivation in life is serving him, obeying him, following him. That means cutting ties to putting anything on par with Jesus, turning your back on them, Jesus only. When we do that, when we get rid of all the attachments to the things of this world and follow Jesus and him only, that allows us to turn around then and say, all right, I'm not attached to these things. I'm not bound to them. I am not enslaved to them as sin enslaves us, and idolatry loves to pull us back, and these are the only things, these are the best things. That was, again, tied in with our conversation last week on the first commandment. Once we are set free from our idolatry to them, then we can look at and say, all right, what is my proper relationship to these things? So there is a step of leaving it all behind for the sake of Christ. He's the one who sets us free. He's the one that forgives us from all of that, those sins and attachments and things like that. So once we are set free, we are enabled to reassess our relationship, especially to see how we can and do function in this world, in our vocations, in a way that, you have renounced your connection to these things, but you still use them for a different ends, a different purpose. Not serving yourself, not serving money, but ultimately living in this world in faith, which is, again, that's not idolatrous then at that point. Your focus is on Christ and him alone. And then using the gifts that God has given us, not for our own ends, not even to try to earn God's favor, but how do we best care for those around us at that point? That's a really hard concept and idea to, first of all, wrap our minds around, let alone then live it out. How do we still function in this world without being bogged down by the ties of even the good things that God gives us and making them the be-all, end-all? And it's that continual renouncing of the idolatrous connection, I would say, to those things. Does that somewhat answer the question, the situation? Yeah, because it's hard because, I mean...
I was thinking maybe if you don't renounce, you can't be my disciple. Okay, I don't think I can renounce because I'm weak. Okay, I can be a disciple and be saved without being a disciple.
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking more.
Yeah.
I'm looking for like the conditions and the if then.
Yeah, I would say we want to avoid creating levels of Christianity, so to speak, that, well, they're the super spiritual ones that get to be disciples, and then you've got the ones that are really good Christians, that they get to be saints, or, whatever hierarchies or levels you want to get with that.
Because we wouldn't call a thief on the cross a disciple, right?
No. Yet at the same time, we might see the beginnings of discipleship in him. Disciple does seem to be one that more specifically follows after Jesus. It's hard because the modern usage of that title disciple is the title disciple, that kind of position, was not really talked about for a number of years in Christianity. And recently, I would say within the last 50 years at most, that title has been come and applied more. We should really focus on discipleship, following Jesus. In a lot of ways, I think the modern usage of that word disciple has more overtones of like sanctification, of living it out, getting our lives in line with what we say we believe. And there's a danger to that, obviously. Again, there's multiple levels of, well, you're a Christian, but I'm a disciple. Yeah, you're sitting in the pews, but are you really following Jesus? And it's very easy to turn those things into a new law, which, again, as we're going through these commandments tonight, Luther really rails against that kind of thing.
This sounds like this is law preaching from Jesus, though, right?
Yes.
And of course, my theological training says, well, okay, this is just like self-abuse. This is just like this is just slapping you and reminding me of your sinfulness.
And yet, there's that tension there of hate your father and mother, and now the fourth commandment tonight, which is the first one we'll look at: honor your father and mother. So what? What are we supposed to do with that? Honor your father and mother, no hate them. So,
I think a lot of us would be in the same position on this. My father and mother, and my father in particular, very strongly, were the ones who taught me about Jesus and taught me to trust this.
Yep.
Very, wonderfully.
Yep.
It gave me the peace of Jesus when I was little, and
yeah.
the foundation of that.
Yep. So, situating, first of all, Jesus' teaching within the context of Luke's gospel. He's heading toward the cross. He's just finished the meal with the Pharisees, so he tells a parable to those who were invited. He tells a parable to the one who did the inviting, and then he just tells a parable overall about you better drop everything and follow him, because you don't, if you reject the invitation of the great banquet, the master of the feast is going to invite the lame, the poor, the crippled, all these people. And then Jesus immediately turns and says, you got to hate everyone. So again, in context here, it's these Pharisees are unwilling to give up the things that they love for the sake of following. And in their day and age, in their situation, it very much was. There was going to need to be a firm break for the sake of following Jesus. Our context is a little different. Again, there's law preaching going on. Elsewhere, Jesus is submissive to his own parents. He submits to them. We would say he honors them. But now you're saying we hate our parents, unlike you did. And
you can't be guilty of idolatry.
Exactly. Well, this is true. This is true. He does things well, and not just because he's the golden child, but because he's God. There is that balance that needs to take place there. Seeing things in context, seeing the big picture, but also recognizing, like you said, this is very clearly law preaching on Jesus' part. For those that are comfortable in their situation and their sin, you need the law to smack you upside the head so that you can receive that gospel of here's what Christ has done for you, here's that word of forgiveness.
This makes you uncomfortable no matter where you are.
This is true. Yep. And it's good to be reminded. Yeah.
Could it be maybe that in this particular context he wasn't meaning it literally?
Yeah.
He was basically saying you gotta put all these other things second and put God first.
Yes, and that's ultimately, as the other gospel writers record this kind of teaching from Jesus. I know it's Matthew. If you do not love me more than father and mother and all these others, you cannot be my disciple. So really, that's what's going on. Jesus routinely speaks in terms of really it's what we would call exaggeration. I think that the technical term is dialectic negation. He says it's not really this, but it kind of is, but he's using it to make a point of something greater. I've not come to bring peace on earth, but a sword. Well, he has come to bring peace, but also there's this sword aspect that he's really emphasizing. So there is this hyperbole at play in Jesus' teaching here. The attempt on Sunday was to let Jesus' words hit and do that law work of you got to renounce it all. You have to be able to turn your back on that for the sake of following Christ. And in so doing, as Christ sets you free, you become like him, who then comes back and serves and loves all those around him. So that's a long story short, or short story long, maybe. All right, so then let's take a look at the fourth commandment here. Last week was the first table of the law, commandments 1, 2, and 3 really dealt with our relationship with God. Commandments 4 through 10 really deal with our relationship with our neighbor. Our relationship with all those around us, not necessarily directly from God. Luther makes a point here right off the bat that the first commandment is really the most important in your relationship with God. In the same way, he says the fourth commandment is the most important of the last 7 commandments. He says really all that this commandment or all this table of the law is by and large summed up in this commandment. You shall honor your father and your mother, that it may be well with you and you may live long upon the earth. It is interesting, we mentioned it last week just in passing. Luther uses a slightly different wording of the 10 commandments in the large catechism as opposed to the small. When he gets to the small catechism, he's really focusing on drilling this into kids' heads so that they remember kind of the short, simple version of the commandments. But here he expands it. He's got that more full command with the promise. Honor your father and mother, that it may be well with you and live long upon the earth. So I tried to, this week, give a little bit more guidance to our conversation here, trying to see how all of this actually plays out in Luther's large catechism. And one of the first things he says is that as we honor, that word honor has to do with our attitude, with our words, and with our actions. Attitude, words, and actions. So, how would our attitude honor our parents? Speaking respectfully, that's the word I was looking for. I wanted to use the word honorably, but again, I can't use the same word as you're describing it. Being respectful, not having a negative attitude that not just in the words that you use, but how you say things. I say this all the time to in Bible studies, Sunday morning, even with our confirmation kids. How you say something matters as much as what you say. I forgive you. Different than I forgive you.
I love you.
Yeah. Nonverbal communication matters, whether it's an eye roll or whatever. Yeah, I love you. Yeah, wink, nudge. It's different than the full-blown. The attitude really gets at our hearts. It really gets at how do you think about, view, pay attention to, how do you relate to your father and your mother. Luther says it's got to do with our attitude, with our kind of stance before them, honoring them. And then it plays out in our words. How do we honor with our words? Yeah, using nice words, maybe true words.
But some days are better than others.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes. As we come across these commandments, there's a certain way that the expectation is they're supposed to play out this way. But as with all of these commandments, they are words of law. They will condemn us. Even on our best days, we won't get it right. And so our words are meant to be, honorable, respectful, kind words, true words. And yet, when we look at our own lives, not so much. So it is helpful. Quite often as I go through the commandments, especially with our confirmation students, because we take one commandment a week, and that's 10 weeks, plus the introduction, plus the closing, and it becomes like months long that all we're talking about is God's law. So every couple weeks I have to remind them, now this is the law, let me tell you the gospel again. Yeah, that all condemns you, but you need to be reminded that Jesus died for these very sins. And so it's good to hear that reminder again. These laws do and will condemn us. And that's what the law is supposed to do, so that we see our need for Jesus and turn back to Him again and again. Yeah.
For sure.
All right. Attitude, words, and actions. How do our actions honor our parents?
Obedience is a big one.
Obedience. Yeah. Actually following through on what your parents tell you to do. Actually, again, for kids, clean your room. Now, most of us here are adults. If our parents are still alive, not all of them are, how do our actions in honoring our father and mother, how do they play out for us today?
Make sure they're cared for as they go into their second childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's that generation that's somewhere in the middle that they're in, the diaper sandwich generation or something like that. Kids in diapers, parents in diapers. And how do you live in that world that things are tough? Caring for them. Luther, especially in the large catechism, he hammers home a lot of the economic side of things that, oftentimes kids will look down on their parents when the kids kind of get up in society and their parents are these poor peasants that, scrimped and saved to give them the education. But now the kids look down on the parents because the parents are still poor and now the kid's wealthy and the kid's not going to take care of the parents. And he really fights against that. Where the rubber hits the road for us, some of these thoughts, words, actions, our attitudes, words and actions as we're thinking about our parents. It's getting to be parents can't be on their own anymore, so maybe we'll just shove them off in a home somewhere. Let someone else take care of them. Yeah, we'll get around to see them every now and then if we remember. Maybe that's not the best way to honor our parents, even as they are entering second childhood, this time where they are struggling to take care of themselves like they once did. Our roles and responsibilities as children do not end just when we're grown and out of the house, starting our own family, whatever it is. We still have that duty, that responsibility, that command to honor our father and mother. All right, so we've got all of these attitudes, words, and actions at play here. Luther then kind of expands it very broadly as he looks at where this command plays out, and it's not just at the home, although it is that as well. Luther highlights that this starts first and foremost within the family. Then he goes on and he describes that this also applies in what he calls the household. We'll come back to that after we name everything else here. This applies to the government. And it applies in the church. This fourth commandment applies very, very broadly. Luther sees really that the family structure, parents and kids, are the foundation for every other source of authority in this world. Family is what we often think about, your earthly parents, your biological, adopted, whatever it is, your family there. The household is a broad expansion of that. In Luther's day, your household is, maybe your immediate family, but more often than not, if you are kind of upper middle class, you might be able to have some servants around. You might have someone as your apprentice, or you might be apprenticing for someone else, and they were considered part of your household. So in some ways, this is a little bit more of an economic component as opposed to the way we think of households. This would be your employers, your employees, how you relate to them. Again, that connection is much clearer in Luther's day when a lot of this took place actually in a home as opposed to, leave home and go to an office building and work there. But there is this intimate connection between not just the head of the family, but the head of the household, the boss, the guy in charge. He's the one that you should be serving and honoring with your attitude and your actions and your words. How you speak about your boss matters. How you think about your employer matters. In all that we are, say, do, think, we should be reflecting this kind of honor toward those above us. He expands that out to the government as well, seeing that this is not just an insular thing, but there's, we talk about the head of the household and the head of the state. Talk about the guy who's in charge of your, I guess in his area it would be your region. It was state electors, you even had an emperor there. But we've got a governor, the head of the state of Michigan. We've got a president, head of the country. How do we use our attitude, our words, and actions toward those in political office over us? This is hard when you disagree with politics from one side or the other, and you really want to speak poorly of a person in authority over you. And we don't like to do that. So this is very broadly speaking a huge area where, again, our sinfulness is on display. And then last but not least on this applies to the church. Paul talks about being Timothy's father in the faith. And now, again, we Lutherans push back on the term father for, the pastors. But there is a sense in which pastors are kind of the spiritual head of the household of the church. That in pastor's role. I'm to encourage the congregation to grow up into Christ, as Paul talks about in a few different places. And so there is this sense in which the role of the pastor is like a father for the congregation. So how do we honor with our attitudes, our words, and actions the pastor when he has that really crappy sermon? What do you talk about? When he said things just the wrong way, and maybe I'll skip a few weeks and cool down a bit. What was that? Yeah, so you're thankful for the liturgy. Yep. When pastors mess up, and they do, how do you work through that, honoring, respecting pastors as the head of even the church in this place? Yeah. Just as the government is still full of humans, households full of humans, families full of humans, human beings that sin, that get it wrong. Most of the time, they do that unintentionally. By and large, at least for those that are believers, we are seeking to do the Lord's will here. And we get it wrong because we're sinful. But even when people are intentionally misusing their authority, Luther says that's when we got to keep this even more so. As he talks about the fifth commandment, we're supposed to not murder, help people to keep what they have, even when they've deserved some sort of punishment. Even when you think they should get a smack upside the head, you're supposed to honor them in helping them to do things well, to keep their lives in order, to help them to be whole, ultimately, with all that they are. And that's a challenge, to say the least. Obviously, there are limits to all of these commandments as we come across families and households and governments and even churches that tell you this is what you should do, and if it turns out it's sin, it's not true, you don't follow them. So ultimately, this fourth commandment is subservient to the first commandment, love the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. Yeah.
So, you shall not murder. So, when someone's given the death penalty, how does that?
We'll get there. Yeah. Oh, you're on the right track, and we'll get there. Yeah. Ultimately, this whole understanding, we've talked a lot about what our role is as being those under authority, but this speaks to those who are in authority. There is a proper job for them as parents, as employers, as pastors, as government officials, that they are to do their duties well, to do it in accordance with God's will. And there are specific roles and responsibilities in all of this. In most of the large catechism here, Luther really, really rails against the Roman Catholic Church as we know it today. In particular, he rails against monasticism, convents, so monks and nuns, that sort of thing. People who think that, all right, I'm going to leave everything behind, go and shut myself behind a closed door, live in a little commune, and we're just going to do our own thing in here, and that's what's truly honoring to God above all things. Luther says, well, there's no command in Scripture for that, but what there is a command for, honor your father and mother. When a kid obeys their parent, they are doing a more holy work, Luther says, than anyone who's shut themselves up in a monastery. We've got no command to go do that, but what we do have is a command for parents to discipline their children, for changing diapers, for tidying up a household, for clocking in and clocking out of your job, doing it well. That is a good work. That is a holy work, Luther says. when you submit to the government, when you pay your taxes, even when you don't like what they go towards. That is a good work. When it is done in faith, you're honoring your father and mother, those in authority over you, and that's the good works that Scripture teaches. When we live out our trust in God as we serve those around us, fulfilling the vocations that God has put us in, it really does change everything. A lot of Luther's conversation around this 7 commandments here from 4th to the 10th really does revolve around that term vocation. As we are serving God in the station, the offices that He's called us to, whether that's a child or father or mother or whatever else. And that's going to be important as we move on to the 5th commandment.
I thought you were moved. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I was just giving us glimpses ahead. You're fine. Any thoughts on commandment number 4 before we keep moving?
Luther became a monk, wasn't going against the wishes of his own father.
Yep, he had...
This is mostly from the movie.
Yes. In this case, the movie gets it right. Luther's dad wanted him to go to law school. He went, I think, even just for a year. And he was studying to become a lawyer, had got all the really expensive law books, and then kind of under his father's nose, sold all those law books and went to join the monastery. And his father was not happy about it. And again, that was that desire. If I am in this monastery, I can do the good works of confessing every single sin I can think of, punishing my body so that I can earn God's grace and forgiveness, saying all the prayers, doing all the right things so that now I will do enough good works to save myself, instead of obeying father and mother. And through that, actually doing the good works that God has called us to. Because, again, we've been set free from the slavish obedience and are allowed to do this in freedom as those who have been forgiven by Christ. We don't need to earn God's favor by pretending to set up our own works that's really what's going to save me. No, we take God at His word. He says, honor your father and mother, so be a good kid. Be a good parent. That's what God has called you. That's where He's placed you. 5th commandment, you shall not murder. Right off the bat, one of the first things Luther says is that God and the government are excluded from this commandment. That this commandment doesn't say God cannot kill people, because God, in His righteous judgment, knows when someone needs to die for their sins. God, He knows everything. He judges rightly. He's in charge there. Government is excluded from this list because, as Scripture talks in a number of different places, those in leadership have been given, they say, given the sword, given the ability as God's representatives on earth. They are supposed to promote justice. They are supposed to promote the welfare of a society. They have been given the ability to take human lives. And that is not just because of a whim on their part that they get to just decide, I want to kill that person today. It should all flow from this sense of justice, of living and being a certain way in this world. And there may come a time when, for the betterment of society, one person needs to pay for their crimes with death. Luther really does talk about this government side of things, wielding the sword, both on the inside and on the outside. So inside is capital punishment. You've done a crime, you've murdered, whatever, you're not repentant, you get out, you're going to murder someone else. It's in the government's best interest, probably, to put that person to death. For the protection of citizens, so that the rest of the people who are trying to be peaceful are kept safe. But also as a deterrent. It sends a message to the rest of your citizens if you say, we treat the sin of murder so seriously, or whatever other crime it is, that we're willing and we will put people to death if they follow through on that. Well, that might make you think even more so about maybe I shouldn't do that crime. So there's a deterring aspect of that. We can argue about whether our governments do this well or not, whether capital punishment is practiced well in our society. But what we can't argue is that they have no right to do that. They do. And so ultimately, we need to try to, first of all, hold ourselves accountable to whatever that law is, but then to encourage the government to use its sword as God intended them to, and not just killing people for the sake of killing people.
Many times innocent people are put to death.
And that's why we can have these conversations of they can, should they, with how the justice system can be and is perverted in our nation, whether that is racially or just through faulty police work or whatever it is. Maybe it is. Maybe it's something we can do, but because of our current limitations, we shouldn't. And so that is an open question there. But the government has the authority to do that. Outside, before we, yeah.
Comment on that. So, think about this a lot in economics. Government puts innocent people to death either by mistakes or overzealous prosecutions. On the other hand, we have potentially, vicious killers roaming the streets because we can muster the evidence to convict them. Mm-hmm. We have such strong procedural safeguards. So, my favorite American economist, Thomas Sowell, says there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And this is one of those things where it can be tragic.
Yeah.
Because if we err more towards sympathy or compassion, or even just like the safeguard to prevent punishing an innocent man, we run the risk, like by definition, there's no question that we run the risk of letting more vicious killers go free. On the other hand, if we want to snuff out vicious killers and try to get them off the streets, we run the risk of here and there punishing an innocent man. So we have to painfully decide where do we want to err on that spectrum. Yeah. And I think we probably go through cycles where, we err towards this side, but then we err towards punishing bad guys in public safety. Then we get a lot of reports and news about all these innocent guys on death row. And we err the other way, and we get too many violent people on the streets. There is no good answer other than, I guess Luther would go back to the
Yep.
Luther spends 5 times more space on the fourth commandment saying, teach children to obey.
Yeah.
If we did that better, we wouldn't have to worry about the fifth commandment.
Exactly.
At least the punishment aspect of it.
Yep. He says, really, ultimately, all the rest of the commandments from commandments 5 through 10 would be solved if you got number 4 right. If parents actually honored their father and mother, including in the government, if you're obeying the government, you're following the laws, and that should all be good. But there is that element of human sinfulness that is all part of this. And even the government gets it wrong. And maybe especially the government gets it wrong. So again, I like that picture of this swinging back and forth of we fall too far off on one side or the other. And even when you're right on the line, because of human sin and evil in this world, you're going to make the wrong decision. Sometimes your choice is bad choice or bad choice. And there is no good choice because we have broken this creation so much. I think ultimately, to approach especially the issue of capital punishment in too simplistic a way to say, we should just never kill anyone for their crimes or whatever. Well, then what happens when something really bad happens? What happens when a Hitler rises to power, and how do you deal with that? Well, we got to deal with that. On the other end of things, we don't want to just say, just kill every criminal that exists, because again, human life is valuable, and there are people who, probably given the chance, will reform their lives. That's the whole prison system is meant to accomplish. And so having a sense of recognition that, yes, they have the authority to, we're going to fight over, and rightly so, fight over, are we going too far one way or the other? Have those conversations. But again, because this authority flows from God, and God has the authority to take life and to punish evildoers, the state should be doing that as well, the government, the people in charge. We're sinful. We make the wrong choices. So again, there's not a whole lot of guarantee that we'll make the right choice every time. The way that plays out on the outside then is going to war. This is when, for the sake of a nation, a people group, you fight and kill others. Luther says, again, because there is evil in this world and governments should be fighting against evil, that may mean that we are killing other people. Again, this is all couched in, there's a big theological tradition of there being just wars, that we're not just going to fight because we want to fight or we want to conquer someone else's land just because we want it. But what was that?
We want their minerals and their oil.
Yeah, we want their minerals, their oil, we want, just a little more breathing room, a buffer zone between us and the next bad guy that we want to take down. But for the sake of, hey, this organization, this group, this other nation is attacking us and we need to fight to defend ourselves. Or even this people group over here, this nation, this country, whoever it is promoting great and grievous and very clear evil. And for the sake of protecting not just who we are as a people, but for the sake of our neighbors in another country, we step in to say, this kind of thing shouldn't happen. And we are willing to fight and even kill for that purpose. This means that we're in a weird place that as, say you're a Christian soldier, on your own, you shall not murder. But as you are acting in your vocation as someone with the proper authority to kill through your higher-ups in the government, you are able to take another person's life and do it without sinning. It is a hard thing for us to wrap our minds around because we're very much used to, it's all interior, it's all about me. But seeing things through that lens of vocation, of serving where God has put us, does help to frame at least a little bit how we practically live this out. Yes, sir.
I think if more people that are suffering from PTSD understood that part of things, that yes, they might have done things that are horrible for their own personal lives and in their minds, but they were serving and they were the instrument of the government at that point.
Yes.
Having that knowledge.
Yeah, and it's hard. It really is, because as people within the office of, soldier, within that calling in life, you're called to do some pretty terrible things. And not just the over and above what governments are allowed to do. We're not called to wipe out villages of innocent people here. But even in the regular day-to-day act of war, it's not pleasant, to say the least. You're called to take lives in a way that's just, it can eat away at you if you are thinking that it all rests on your shoulders. Instead of saying, I'm filling this office and doing the duty for which God has called me to this. Through the state, through the government. Government should be operating as not just its independent thing. You've got the church over here with God's work, and then the state over here with whoever the political leader is on top. Now, God works through His church, and God works through the government. Again, governments go off the rails routinely, regularly, but it is meant to be God's government. His way of justice, His way of the law operating the way it should. Whether that practically plays out or not is another question, but again, the call is to obey, to serve. All right, we are running short on time, and we've got the rest of this and 2 more commandments to go. This 5th commandment is meant to be both a protection for us and a mirror for us. This law is meant to protect us, that we are not supposed to murder others, and having that prohibition out there should be a protection that other people aren't going to murder us. So it's for our safety that God puts this out. But also, as we come across even the 5th commandment, you shall not murder, it should reveal to us that there's something that's not quite right, not just out there in the world, but here in our hearts as well. This speaks to our hands, our tongue, and our heart. Just about every conversation about the 5th commandment is going to come back to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. You've heard that it was said, you shall not murder. I tell you that everyone who hates his brother, who says to your brother, you fool, these sorts of things are just as bad as actively murdering. Now, there's different consequences, but it's sinful. We can break the 5th commandment with our hands, not just taking someone's life, but by physically harming them. We can speak with murderous intent, that our lips, our tongues are speaking words full of poison, of venom, violent words that tear down and hurt. You may not actively kill someone with your words, but you can do a lot of damage with those words. Now, there's a relatively recent documentary that just landed on Netflix within the last 2 or 3 weeks about a situation somewhere here in Michigan. I can't remember exactly where it was, but where a teenage couple, they were in high school, were being cyberbullied.
Beale City.
Yeah, Beale City, yep. And it went on and on and on, and this cyberbullying wasn't just, saying little random high school mean things here or there, but ultimately it ramped up to this cyberbully telling this girl, you should just kill yourself. No one really loves you. You should just off it. Turns out the cyberbully was her mother. Yeah, so sorry if you were hoping to watch the documentary, I just spoiled it for you. But it started as something just kind of random, but then it ramped up and ramped up and ramped up. And she said she knew her daughter well enough, she wouldn't follow through on the killing herself. So it was just, meaningless words. Yeah.
Do you have Netflix? Mm-hmm. You should see it.
Yeah, it's...
She's a 30, 40 texts.
Oh yeah, a day. Yeah. And this mom was... lying about her job, not actually working where she should. I mean, it's just a mess of a situation, to say the least. Words matter. Words matter. Yes, sir.
Did she kill herself?
She did not. No.
Good.
Yes. Again, literally, thank God for that.
Was the mother punished?
I believe in jail time. I don't know how long. I can't remember how all that played out, but yes.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Good.
When I was 18 months. Oh, yeah. She was bullying her daughter for 18 months.
Yep.
A very strange ending.
Yes. With our hands, with our tongues, and ultimately it has to do with our hearts. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. How we think and feel, how our disposition is toward those around us will play out in our actions. Ultimately, this comes down to hatred. There's an essay in this more recent application of Luther's Large Catechism that really highlights that racism, being hatred, is a violation of the 5th commandment. And how we relate to those around us, how our heart station is, how our heart is situated toward those around us, really, it does matter. Ultimately, with all of these laws, with all that God wants us to be and how He wants us to deal with the world around us. It's not that He just wants us to get, a little better, knock out that sin, do the right actions here and get a little better in life. No, He wants to kill you and make you alive. He wants to cut that sinful heart out and give you a heart of flesh. A heart that is actually in a right relationship with those around you. And that, as we explore these commandments, we see just all over the place that our hearts are not right. Whether it's in relation to our parents or the others around us. This is getting back to the situation of a soldier. A soldier can break the fifth commandment, even in his duty of killing those around him. He kills when he hates. He breaks this fifth commandment when he shoots someone and wants them to die because he hates them. Instead of, I've been assigned to do this, I'm doing what my station in life is, when he finds a sick enjoyment of ending the life of another, that's breaking the fifth commandment. Again, it gets that weird situation that you're both an individual, but as a Christian, in an office, in a position, and how do the two relate? It gets to be much more complicated than you can, so you should. Well, maybe not. All right, there's probably lots we could talk about with Fifth Commandment. Lots of areas that this commandment is broken in our world today, but we've got now 12 minutes to cover 2 more commandments. And these are light ones, obviously, right? No other issues with the 6th or 7th commandments. 6th commandment, you shall not commit adultery. This commandment is about chastity, specifically within and outside of marriage. Now, we hear the word chastity and we think of, all right, withholding from sex. You don't do it. You are chaste in that way. And again, this gets at Luther's railing against monasteries or convents. You go in the convent and obviously you're not having sex with anyone, so you're safe and you're fully chaste. Well, Luther says we are commanded to be married. It's not a full command like others, but as God created human beings, He made them male and female. Man will leave his father and mother, hold fast to his wife, and they will become one flesh. There's a divine prompting of this. Marriage is good because God ordained it and because human sexuality is fulfilled in it. God ordained marriage and human sexuality is fulfilled in it. We are called to properly use the sexual desires that we have been given by God. And that takes place within marriage. So if you're not married, you should not be giving into these sexual urges or desires. And if you are married, you should give into them with your spouse. Not someone who's not your spouse, wherever that falls. There is a proper use of sex within marriage. This flew in the face of some of Luther's contemporaries, even some throughout church history. There was kind of this idea that sex is just always sinful, always impure, even in marriage, that maybe you can have sex so you can have kids and raise them up, but you shouldn't like it. If you like it, then it's sin. Because the focus is then on your enjoyment of it, and it's all about you, and now you're the be-all, end-all. And Luther kind of just blows that all out of the water by going back to Genesis. God created male and female to be together. The call is to live within marriage in a way that honors what God has given us. Loving and honoring our spouses. Serving them well with all that we are, yes, even including our sexuality. He says in in this large commandment, or large catechism, that we are called to love and honor the spouse that God has given us. Again, this is that picture of God has put us in these vocations of husband, wife. Even He puts us in vocations of being single and being divorced. And through whatever means, we are called to be faithful where God has put us. And that's hard. We like to go our own ways, do our own things. But Luther calls us back to again, the Ten Commandments, Scripture overall, and says, no, you can and should be faithful where God has put you. Again, lots of things we could talk about with the sixth commandment here. Any quick questions on this before we try hitting the seventh?
Comment.
Yeah.
Survey data, I think, that came out recently, that for Gen Z, so I don't know what the age cutoff is, but that's like the youngest, I guess, generation that's grown up. The women, the young women, rated getting married, having children, forming a family is the lowest
priority.
Goal, priority. And you've seen this too. Mm-hmm. And the young men rated it as the highest. And it's I guess, it's disturbing, but is there some hope there that men want to form families and be responsible, but women don't? It's just weird.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing that's wrapped up in these kind of surveys is this younger generation is across the board having sex less, which when it's outside of marriage, we cheer that on and say yes, but that also means there's not that marriage happening and that bond forming and kids and all that's tied in with it. I was just yesterday, we had a circuit meeting talking with area pastors and talking with Tyson down at Big Rapids, his campus ministry with Ferris. He says they've been seeing a lot of Gen Z students come, and they're all in. They're inviting people. They have no qualms about just pulling people in left and right. And there's something about this generation that is encouraging, but he says, I love them, and they're all messed up. Which is humanity.
But
yeah.
It's in a unique way.
Yes, yeah. It is a unique way that is, in some ways, a corrective towards previous generations, just as it always happens. Generations kind of swing back and forth. But yeah, there is something encouraging about men wanting to be faithful in their leadership in the home, in society, in the church. Trick is getting everyone on board for that.
Well, there should be a fourth commandment tie in there too.
Oh yeah.
Parents should want that for their kids.
Yes. Yep.
And it's an honor. What's greater honor? How can I pay back my parents? They were so good to me. Luther's written the fourth commandment thing about talking about how they, you were helpless for so long.
Yep.
And you would not have survived without them.
Yep.
So what can we do? Well, give them, be successful and responsible. They can be proud that we made it.
Yep.
And then give them grandkids, right?
Yeah. Yep. We were talking tonight at dinner. Being a grandparent, having grandkids, it changes you. It's something special. Yeah. 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 Kids are a gift from the Lord, and grandkids are a gift from the Lord.
And great.
And great. Yes. Yeah. And recognizing that, naming that, seeing where this plays out is helpful. Again, the sixth commandment, we could say the same thing as with the fifth. It is put out there as a protection for marriage. God honors marriage by putting a commandment not to break marriages here, not committing adultery. And it also reflects on our heart to show us all the different ways we lust, we sin in our sexuality, and we are called to repentance in all of it. Not just out there with those people that have that sin. No, we got to check our own hearts and make sure we are repenting well for these things. Seventh and final commandment today, you shall not steal. Luther makes a point that this is an issue both with the first table of the law and the second table of the law. So the first three commandments, this is an issue of idolatry. when we take money, possessions, mammon, the stuff that God gives us, and that's the be-all, end-all, all of a sudden we've broken the first commandment, let alone the first table of the law, rightly ordering our relationships with God. This is also a second table of the law issue as we're dealing with our neighbors. When money becomes the driving force, I don't care who I'm going to step on to get what I want. Whether I am literally stealing from someone, or if I'm simply using people to get what I want. That is an issue for both tables of the law. Luther actually, he sees this not just on a small scale, but a large scale. It's actually both small and large. He spends some time, don't steal in your job, all right, whatever. Don't just take paper clips as you're in the office, whatever. So you can talk about that. These are the people we really rail against. We put people to death for stealing gold coins here and there. And yet, he says, we look at the banking systems as they are, and they are overcharging poor people. They are ripping people off left and right, and we give them more power and authority because they have money. And we treat them with honor and respect because look at how wealthy they've gained. Obviously, they're doing something right. It's actually, reading through Luther's explanation of the fifth commandment in the large catechism, he really spends a lot of time railing against the economic systems of his day and age. Yes, he starts off in the small scale, individual employees doing things. He gets a little bit larger of how you interact with your local community, maybe a little bit larger still as you're interacting with your region, and then goes again to nation-state level here, talking about emperors and large banking institutions and who's making loans and things to others, ultimately placing the blame, big shocker, the feet of the Pope. Says it's all about money. You got to pay to get your loved one out of purgatory, and who knows how much that's actually going to cost you. But you got to pay some more. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Pay more. Give us more money, and then we'll offer forgiveness. Is that enough? I don't know. Give us some more money, and we'll tell you. And there's all sorts of stuff wrapped up in that. Ultimately, he says that God proverbially enforces this commandment in various vocations. As Luther explains this fifth commandment, he basically says, you steal, people are going to steal back from you. It's not going to go well for you. He doesn't actually really spend a whole lot of time talking about the eternal punishments of, you steal, you're going to be punished eternally for it. He focuses on the here and now. Quite practically, as we live our lives, it's not going to go well. He says at one point that God appoints thieves to steal from thieves. And there's just kind of that backbiting, that infighting that happens, which is why gangs are always lookout for other gangs, and you kill one person and someone's going to kill you because you killed them, and it's this never-ending back and forth that happens as you're stealing from one another.
Talking about the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Stealing, killing, are kind of the obvious things we need to have a peaceful marketplace. And I reference Goodfellas as one of my favorites. It's a true crime movie. It's like almost everything in there really happened. They changed some of the places and names, but I said, just watch Goodfellas. Did they get away with it? Well, a lot of them got caught and put in prison, but most of them just got whacked by other monsters. Yeah. It's like crime doesn't pay. It pays maybe, if you're lucky, for a minute. Yep. But otherwise, this doesn't pay. Yeah. And so in economics, we talk about we can get people to behave just through pure incentives of, what's going to pay off for me the most in the long run. Yeah. Of course, God wants our hearts to be pure too, but if we can't get that, we can at least get people to think about the consequences, and then act as if you love God and care about your neighbor, and maybe eventually you can train yourself to kind of a sense of honorable conduct. Yep. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a good way to present it, but that's how economists think about it often. Yeah. And there is this sense in which our actions come before our hearts
getting in line with those actions. They say if you want to love someone, act like you love them. Kind of ask yourself, what would I do if I actually cared about this person, and then do that. And as you go about imitating someone who loves another, actually cares about another human being, ultimately your heart is going to follow along with that. Oftentimes you have to teach your kids to say the words, "I'm sorry," before they actually believe it, before they actually mean it. So you give them the basics, that framework and structure, so that as they grow and develop, they fill in that, and they actually become who they want to be, or become who you are trying to get them to be. This is, whether it's economics or just in general human Christian life, if we are able to conform our lives to what God would have us, that would make a difference. Ultimately, we shouldn't just be going through the motions. Our heart should be in it. But that's, again, why we go to God for forgiveness. With all of this, we are not going to do it perfectly, which is why we rely again and again on the grace of God, the only source of help that we have. And thanks be to God, He sent His Son to forgive us, to take our sins, so we break all of these commandments, put Him to death on the cross, and give us His grace, His mercy, His forgiveness. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try at all these. We should care about them all. We should live them out well. But when we don't, we have the grace of God. And again, thanks be to God. 2 minutes over. Let's wrap up with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.